In part 2 of our series on Jeremy Conn, we dive into his well-developed role as class clown, something that may have disguised how heartfelt Jeremy really is. We touch down on who Jeremy blames for his big old bleeding heart. Jerome Boger is in the house. We learn how Jeremy and Jerome connected, and we cover the journey of how Jeremy and Mo's paths crossed and how ever since they've traveled a road together. Before we met personally, and I would listen to you on the radio, and I said this to Mo and Sanzi, that Jeremy came off to me like the class clown.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a disparaging way.
I was class clown in high school, so it doesn't.
So I wasn't wrong, but that was your radio persona from my perspective. And when I met you and talked to you, we were just talking about things about life, and I just was really humbled and surprised by, not that I didn't think you had a heart. Yeah. I didn't think you were a Tin Man or anything like that, but I thought that, I mean, what came through for me was just how heartfelt you are. And it's stories like taking in these twin boys that are obviously have been affected positively by you because they're going off and doing some things in the world now, and then with Mo.
Yeah.
And it's such a good story, and that's why we're here today, because we wanted to get that from you, just so people can get to know who Jeremy Conn is outside of being on the radio and being the class clown.
You know what's odd about that is, like, I've always liked making people smile. I mean, there's plenty of ways to do it. Laughter seems to be the easiest and cheapest way to do it, sometimes at your own expense. So I've always done that. Even when I was a kid, my mom would have me, like, the voices I do now are different than the ones I would do as a kid. She's like, do Forrest Gump, do Sling Blade, talk like E.T. And I'm like, Jesus, Mom, leave me alone.
How often do you have to practice those?
I mean, there's just like little things that you pick up along the way where you can kind of hear it. And, like, to be honest, like,
Jerome Boger and all that.
Yeah, I mean, that was by accident in a friend's basement, and he had this great setup, and people were like, say, oh, they're making a big call on the game. He had 5 TVs. He had one on the lower. It's like, oh, they're making a big call here. And I said, oh, I can do that. And then I just started, after further review. So I started doing that, and they all started, like, laughing. I'm like, is that funny? You guys think? He's like, oh my God, man, we know who that guy is. You nailed it. Nobody knew what his name was. And then, of course, now I got to learn it, and I tell the story on the air, and Scott starts laughing. So I mean, like, I joke all the time that I won the scratch off, the dollar scratch off of doing voices where Frank Caliendo hit the Mega Millions. But no, like, with my life, it's always been about that. And my mom is someone who, she has a really big heart and would do anything for anyone. She has her faults. She has, like, we all do. But it's just something to watch her, whether she's a bleeding heart. And I think she passed it on to me. And I don't know if it was when my grandmother passed because I took care of her. My grandmother died from brain and lung cancer, and I used all my vacation days at work to take care of her. And I did all the things that you don't think you can do for another human being. And I know you just had your father passed, and, like, my grandmother was like, I lived with her for 2 years. She was like my second mom, and I was so close to her, and I feel like my personality, everything that I am, I got from her, which sounds really strange, but we were so close. And from helping her bathe to wiping her rear end to begging her to take medicine, and she would mouth to me she's sorry, and then I'll never forget it. I was watching the Orioles Oakland A's play. It was a West Coast game. It's 10 o'clock, and every inning I would go check on her, and she had what's called that death rattle, so I knew it was coming. And I was the only one, like, my cousin was there with me, but my dad had a trip planned, and hospice told him that she had more time, and which she didn't. She faded fast when he left, and I was trying to give the updates, and everything was going on. I got to the beginning. It was the middle of the third, so the A's were coming up to bat, so every half inning I'd kind of walk in, and I didn't hear anything. And we had, like, I mean, look, it was a little trashy house in Essex, but it's what I had at the time. We had these, not like a curtain, but like little beads that were down that you'd walk in this back room, and I didn't hear the rattle. And I went over and laid my head on her chest, kind of see if she was breathing, talked to her for about 5 minutes, or what I believe is her, and then I had to make the phone calls to tell everybody she had passed. I did her eulogy. And it meant a lot to me to be able to do those things because I cared so much about her. And I don't know if that's when this switch went off in my head about just trying to do more. And, like, if I sit here, I always felt weird talking about this stuff, and I don't bring it up on the air as much. Sometimes some of that stuff comes through, But somebody told me, and I think it was my 40th birthday. It's still pinned to my Twitter page. I did a podcast on my 40th birthday. You can actually hear it because I had a 40th birthday party that weekend where I tied one on pretty hard, so my voice is a little raspy. But I mean, I like to have a good time. I like to laugh. But my wife and I, before we took in the twins, we took in a father and son that fell in hard times. And a couple months ago, when I was doing 10 Things You Don't Know About Me, I told the story about this father and son, Big Rich and Little Rich. Big Rich had died the night before, and I just found out. So I talked about him on the air, and it kind of blew up in our face. It wasn't a good fit for us. Big Rich had diabetes, and that's ended up, what caused him to pass. And I eventually had to ask them to leave, but I felt so bad because I really liked the kid. And it's like, what happens to him? And as my wife says to me all the time, you can't save the world. You can do as much as you want, but I overextend myself as much as possible, and we're constantly trying to do things for others. And I guess, not to just totally get on some rant here, and I know I've been just rambling. I don't know if this is what you're looking for or what, but
know you.
Well, so we talk about it all the time. My wife gets upset at me for overextending myself, but it's so funny because over the years she's learned to understand what I'm about. I want to leave this place, this earth, better off than when I got here. And there's only so much I can do. I feel like I've taught my kids the right way to treat people and how to be. Politics aside, just speaking of individuals and how you should be around people and how you should treat them. I love the fact they're around to see me taking in the twins, taking in Big Rich and Little Rich. Another thing that a lot of people don't know about me is I was on Facebook one night. We just talked about a big win I had this weekend, but I had a win on FanDuel one night where I won like $4,000. And I got on Facebook, and the first thing I see is a girl I went to high school with that her grandson, who was 6 months old, had died. And she was asking for help. She was asking for money to pay for his funeral. She didn't have any money. And immediately it hits me right it tugs on the heartstrings, and I sent her a private message and said, can you meet me tomorrow? Took the money out, and I paid for all of it. I gave her everything I had to help out. And I'm not saying when people come to you, and especially with what's going on with Mo, what's happening here, I'm not doing this for anybody for that matter. Like, I'm not doing this for any specific reason. I'm doing it because I think I'm supposed to. I don't like the accolades and the stuff, the pats on the back. People are like, oh, you're doing. I don't think I'm doing anything outrageous. I think I'm doing what I'm supposed to because that's my friend. I say this all the time when I'm talking about the kids. Like, I'm not their dad, but especially him. When you're around him, you see what he's about and how special he is. And just to see the videos that came in and all the other stuff, it's so touching and it's so unbelievable. So I don't mean to dismiss people, and I'm like, hey, I'm not looking for anything. I tell Sanzi all the time, kick me out of the house if you see me too much and I'm bothering you guys. But I just love spending time with them. I haven't played video games in years, and now I look forward to it every day. Yesterday I came so far out of my way to make sure I made it by just to see him for 45 minutes before I ran home, and I got home. I shouldn't be saying this because I got home about 20 minutes before my show started. Had to hurry up and jump in the shower. Now, I know what I'm going to talk about. I've got my show set up from earlier in the day when I'm driving around, but right now he's the most important thing to me.